speaking of storytelling, you have an obviously incredible story. Your career is about storytelling. How does your story help you become a better storyteller?
hmm If you'd asked me to tell this story during the summer when this was like happening, I would have never been able to do it. I didn't talk about this really with anyone. It was just like too difficult when I was still going through it. And then I think this year, I mean, as a journalist, as a storyteller, I'm always looking for, stories that are going to help people, that are going to impact others, that are going to share an important message. And then I realized, you know, that I have my own,
Yeah.
which is can be really vulnerable. I think as a journalist, you're typically not telling your own story. And then I was like, this is a story, especially because melanoma rates are rising among younger women. And so I was like, this is something that people should know about. Um, and then, I reached out to doctors, able to find out a lot more about it. And I still have people who are reaching out to me, especially like my mom's coworkers who are like, they're sharing with their daughters. And that, to me, as a journalist, means the world to me that, I can take something that I went through, take my story, and kind of do the same thing that I do in my own career,
Yeah.
and just make sure that I'm sharing a message that will resonate with people, and help people. So, yeah.
Does it also feel like you can see the power that someone young can have too? I think in journalism, it's always about, well, you got to pay your dues, especially with traditional journalism. You got to
Mhm.
go to Montana, then you got to go to Kentucky, then you go to Pittsburgh, then you go to DC, and then you go to New York City. You you're 21 or 20, 22?
20.
You're 20 years old
Yeah.
and you've already gotten people to be touched and moved. What is
Mhm.
that? What does that do to your confidence?
Yeah, I think it's crazy because, even just this story, but also, others, anytime you have people who resonate with something that you write, even if that's another student, but especially because it's been people, outside of my own network,
Yeah.
to reach out to me and tell me that, they're moved by something that I wrote. It reminds me why I went into this career. Um, because, you know, you can be 20 and you can write something that resonates with people who are of all generations,
Yeah.
whether that's them personally or for their own, for their children, kind of like with this story. And I think, yeah, it is a confidence booster because it's showing me that, I'm still in college. Um, Especially with like getting contacts, I was able to speak with some amazing doctors. It just shows you that, even as a student journalist, people, are believe in what you have to say and think it's important enough to talk to you, even though, this isn't for like a major publication, to still have doctors to believe in the story I'm telling and think that I can make a difference and take the time to speak with me meant a lot. But yeah, definitely just hearing the kind of words I've been hearing from people that my story resonates with them. It just reminds me of, why I went into this career in the first place. It makes me excited for, graduation.
I mean, look, I I connected with you after you shared your story. So I go to Syracuse. That's like the
Right.
opposite
Yeah.
side of the East Coast. The weather
Uh-huh.
couldn't be more different, and I reached out. So
Yeah.
kind of perspective right there. I want to go back to what you were talking about with talking to doctors. So in
hmm
your story where you talked about where you shared your cancer experience, I noticed that you reached out to a doctor who works at the Mayo Clinic. And for people who don't
hmm
know, the Mayo Clinic is up there with like the NIH and other great. You see, I guess I know things. I don't know. um, it's up there with like the NIH and all the other great hospitals in the world. The Mayo Clinic's in Minnesota. You go to University of Miami. Just because they
hmm
both start with the letter M doesn't mean that they're near each other. Um, did your vulnerability saying like, "Hey, I had melanoma. Hey, I had this experience." Did it make it easier for people to want to talk to you? And when they talk to you, do you think you got better answers? Because something that I've heard from a lot of journalists is whether it's that they're bilingual and they speak to someone who they know speaks Spanish in Spanish, or they open up about their experience like you're doing right now. It not only helps them get to talk to people, but it also gets them to get people to be more vulnerable and add more richer details.
I definitely think part of that, reaching out to me, and they have crazy
They reached
busy
out to you?
schedule. No, sorry,
Oh,
reaching
okay.
back out to me.
Okay.
Um, because they're doctors, so their schedules are, I mean, they were just trying to get an interview was a struggle.
Yeah.
Um, so the fact that they not only responded to me, but made the time to plan something within their busy schedule meant a lot. And I think it did have a large part of it was me prefacing in my emails, like, I did have melanoma, which is why I'm interested in covering the story. Um, and I definitely think that might have, I don't know, I didn't really ask them if that, is why they agreed to do an interview with me, but I can imagine that would be a factor. And I definitely think during the interview, especially Dr. Brewer at the, the Mayo Clinic, he was telling me, he was like, after our interview, he was asking me, about my own experience, like
Yeah.
checking on me, like, oh, like you're still cancer free, how's your recovery? Um, and so we were also able to talk about melanoma, not just from, a strictly medical perspective, but also the toll that it takes on the patients that he sees. And I was able to kind of relate to things he was telling me about his patients, um, tell him stories about, because we were trying to talk about why people aren't concerned about this or some of the lifestyle factors that lead to it. And so I was able to tell him, things from my own experience, like things I observed from my friends. And then he was able to, back that up with facts or be like, yeah, I see the exact same thing in my career. So I definitely think being vulnerable, sharing my story, was able to have a more impactful interview. Um, and he was just like, even at the end, like I said, just checking up on me and how I was doing, really meant a lot. So yeah.
And that can kind of lighten the intensity that comes with a lot of interviews. In journalism,
Yes.
it can be very transactional, as anyone who spent 5 minutes in the media industry knows. And so, for you to have experiences where doctors are reaching out to you, checking in on you, shows the rapport that can kind of be made just from you sharing your story, just from you being comfortable doing that.
No, yeah. I mean, especially with doctors, so if you're talking to any type of expert or professional, you don't really know how that's going to go. But yeah, it definitely shows that, when you make a connection with someone as a journalist, whether that's something like cancer or even something that's, smaller, it can go a long way. But yeah.
No, and also getting people to talk, getting doctors or getting politicians or
Hmm.
police officers to talk in people terms rather than their jargon is also
Yeah.
really important too, because you're a journalist, you're not a doctor, and so all the
Hmm.
scientific terms you may be able to understand them, but if you're trying to communicate with large audiences, it's not necessarily always the best information.
Right. Yeah. And that was something I remember going into these interviews thinking, I mean, for me, because I've done so much research, I kind of understand some of the lingo and I understand um, kind of more about skin cancer than I think the general public does. But I
Yeah.
remember going into it, making sure, like, how would you explain this to someone who doesn't know anything about skin cancer? Or like, how does melanoma like, what is melanoma? Because I
Yeah.
mean, some people might not even know what that means. And just making sure that I explained all of the medical jargon in ways that were digestible for people was also something that I was really cognizant going into it because I wanted, people to be able to read this and actually take away something from it and not like, read it and be confused, but, understand what I was.
What is it like? Where did the hesitation come from to share your story?
Yeah, I think it was just the hesitation was more, I didn't want to even think about it. It was just something that was like on my brain. all the time in the summer. And then it was like when I went to school, I wanted that distraction. I wanted to just get back into it and kind of pretend it didn't happen. Um, and then, I realized, why would I? Obviously, I'm not going to escape. I have this huge scar on my chest. People ask me about it all the time. Like, this isn't something that I can run away from. So I
Yeah.
might as well, turn my experience into something good. And I think that doing the stories helped that a lot. Because now I can, think of my experience and know that I'm doing something good with it. It wasn't just like this happened to me and it was awful, but it's like this happened to me and it was awful, but now I can share my story and maybe help other people protect themselves and avoid getting skin cancer. And so I think that for me has helped a lot. Um, just I guess move on, not even move on from it, but just see my experience in a different light.
And also, I would assume now that you're open about it and you're talking to someone on a podcast that you didn't even know probably existed outside of a LinkedIn connection a
Mm-hmm.
week ago, uh, it's a part of you now. And I guess
Yes.
you opening up and sharing it shows that you're willing to reflect that as well. That like this is a part of me and leaning into your identity.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a, form of kind of self-acceptance. Like I think like I was saying, I wanted to forget it happened, not talk to anyone about it. And then in that way it was like it never happened. But I think definitely doing the story, it's like, yeah, like this is a part of my life now. I've had to make, significant lifestyle changes. And that's, I think just that part of self-acceptance, like, how I live my life is gonna have to be different. Um, but yeah, it is part of my identity now.
What was there like a social media post or a moment where you're like, I have to share this? Because it would have been very easy for you, understandable, and I would assume there's no right answer. Again, I don't want to speak for you, but
Mm.
was there like a moment where you're like, I want to share this. I'm going to be open about it.
I honestly think just going to school, especially being in Miami, and just kind of like observing, my classmates and my friends, going, they were tanning all the time
Yeah.
and they were going to tanning bed. And, I'd warn people, like, especially my roommates, I'd be like, don't go to tanning bed. That's going to give you cancer. And they're like, and they would be like, yeah, okay. And they would still go. And I'm like, okay, there's clearly an issue here, which I did talk about, like the doctor. It's like people warn you about skin cancer, but it doesn't resonate with people.
Yeah.
And I guess even they were telling me like they're trying to figure out ways, to communicate this in a way that actually resonates with especially younger generation. And so I guess I was like, the best way I think to resonate with people and to maybe not scare them, but like you never think it's gonna happen until it does.
Yeah.
And I think people are like, oh, you can get skin cancer, and they're like, okay. And I'm kind of here like, no, like I actually did, like it's
Yeah.
actually possible. So I think honestly, what sparked me to speak up about it was just observing, the people around me, especially like the young women, knowing how vulnerable they are, seeing kind of their behaviors in the sun, and just wanting to make sure that they stay protected so they don't have to go through what